Howdy, friends, and welcome to the StoryField. This is a podcast where we talk about business, faith, and life in general.
Okay, so here's the deal. We want you to be encouraged. We want you living in hope. This life we live is complex. It's hard at times. At the StoryField, you will find great stories of normal people just like us who will inspire you. Our goal is that you leave encouraged, inspired, and excited to move forward in life. But before we get started, one thing though, if you're listening and you find yourself really hopeless right now, send us an email at hope@thestoryfield.com so we can pray for you. Thanks for joining us today. Let's get started. Hey, StoryField. We've done, maybe this is our third in person. And what's so cool is that today I have Charles Davis. Man, thank you for making time. You live, I looked it up just before we left, before you got here, 3,571 miles away from where we're sitting in Petersburg, Alaska, which we're going to get into just because, we're Central Texas. We don't know anything about Alaska, but I'm super honored. So the way I want to start this is to say for the listeners, if you have ever wanted to ride or spend the night or spend some time on a yacht, if you've ever wanted to visit Alaska, or if you ever wanted to do both of those at the same time, then you are listening to the right episode, because Charles, you are the owner, you and your bride, and the captain of the Alaskan Legend, which is a yacht based out of Petersburg, Alaska. I want to say Arkansas. Man, I can't even think that far. So, man, thank you for making time for this interview.
Absolutely. It was a quick jog down here.
Yeah, not a big deal.
We made it in a couple of days.
3,000 miles away.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think my heart for this interview is, I want to cover the boat and what the Lord and you and your family are doing through that, what your heart is for that. But it's really an incredible opportunity to spend some time in a place that's unbelievably gorgeous. On a yacht in Alaska. So I really do want people who are listening to this, you can get a little bit of information about the yacht at alaskayacht.com.
Yeah,
and
that's correct.
Is there another place? I think you might have, there's some social media stuff about it too?
Yeah, we've got a little social media.
Okay, where do we find this?
Instagram, Facebook.
Okay. Is it the Alaskan Legend? Is it like at Alaskan Legend?
I think that's what it is. My daughter set it up for me. I understand. Never go on it. But
you're like, he wouldn't say it.
You jump on the Alaska Yacht.
Okay, we'll find it.
And a message gets to me. I think I might even have my phone number on there. Get a hold of me directly.
Okay.
So,
here's where I want to go. On the StoryField, we like to kind of track a person's timeline a little bit. I want to talk about growing up, what it was like. I want to ask questions about Alaska, but also I want you to interweave whenever we just get rolling into it, the Lord's voice. Charles, you're an entrepreneur. You have 3 businesses. You're a family man. You have 3 daughters.
Yes.
Several of them grown and gone, and one married and a grandson.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to talk about, but I don't want you to hold back on, how you make decisions, because there's one. It's really a cool thing. We'll get into it. Kind of just give everybody a little bit of flyby. But you think differently than most people I've encountered. And I've just known that from our short meeting the other day. And you think about things very innovatively. And I want to know how you make decisions with the Lord, how you think about stuff, why you do the risky things you do, that type of thing. So all that to say, man, welcome to Texas. We're super glad you're here. I'm glad you're sitting across the table from me. And let's get started. So tell me, where you grew up. I want to know about Alaska, your family, all that good stuff. Let's get rolling.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me here. Yeah, it's been a blessing. So, just to let you know right off the bat, we don't live in igloos.
Okay.
I know you're all the way from Texas, but we get people like, you live in igloos? What's it's
you probably saved me from a stupid question.
Think we're safe. Got your back, man. No, I was born and raised in Alaska, and I grew up in logging community, small logging camps, and
what does that mean though when you say like a camp?
We lived on an island in Alaska in the middle of nowhere, and there might be the population 60 to 85 people in a logging camp. My old man was a logger, and worked on the water, and so my upbringing, if all your logs are moved out on the water, the rafting grounds. My dad worked on the water was right there. The camp's always built around the water. So I was a kid that sit in school, and I'd hear my dad's voice out there, son of a out there yelling some obscenities. Kids would be like, "Is that your dad?" And be like, "Yeah, that's my dad."
So it can be a rough place. Logging camp.
You grew up in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, 9 years old, me and my brothers, take a rowboat out to an island, and go camping by ourselves. We're like 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, you take a boat out to an island. And I mean, I look back at it now, I'm like, I wouldn't want my kids doing that. I mean, we have as much as 25-foot tide swings sometimes. There's a lot going on the water out there, right? But yeah, it wasn't a big deal for us to take our BB guns or grab our bicycle and, go right out someplace and go camping.
So was it super extreme weather growing up where you were?
Like 40 below and stuff like that, but a lot of rain, I mean, there's times, might end up with 4 feet of snow on the ground, but, we'd love to go snow machining up in the mountains. But, yeah, we get down to 0 degrees, wind chill a little under. Wet cold's pretty tough on you, though, and Southeast Alaska is wet. It's on the water.
Now, for those people who may not know, because honestly, I've had to look it up too, Southeast Alaska, where is that? I mean, when we're looking at the actual mainland, I had to look it up where it was, really, because I didn't know what you're talking about, in full disclosure.
Yeah, it parallels Canada, up the west side of Canada.
Okay.
And so if you leave Washington State, you're going to go through Canada for a ways on the water, and before you hit the Alaskan border. And then Southeast Alaska is the inside passage heading up. So
all those
remote, we've got middle of
islands.
Yeah, middle of nowhere. I grew up did all my high school in Will Pass, and we didn't have money. It was kind of poor conditions. I mean, we had basically a 2-room house. We had 21 kids from kindergarten to high school, small school. My kids loved that. I was valedictorian, head of my class by process of elimination, and it's flurried.
Didn't you graduate with yourself, basically?
Yeah. Weren't you Totally. But we had firewood for heat. That was our only heat source. We had running cold water till it froze, and we packed the water, split in firewood, generator for power, outhouse for a bathroom. And so I grew up in the sticks.
Do you look back on it though fondly? I mean,
yeah. It kind of makes you who you are a little bit. That's how I was 15 years old and got my first motorcycle. I didn't know what a carburetor was. I didn't know what a coil was, and that's just how you learn. You ask questions and you're in the middle of nowhere. You figure it out.
So you're on the water. I mean, you're water people. I mean,
yeah.
What about, just a side note for me, what about like medical stuff? What'd you do for like any kind of, maybe even more serious medicals? Did you have to fly somewhere?
Yeah, you'd have to fly if it was emergency. It might be send out a medevac, a helicopter.
I've already kind of wanted that.
Yeah, if somebody gets seriously hurt, they have to helicopter them out. Maybe stick them on a float plane and fly them out. So yeah, it's sometimes when you're out there, it's no joke.
Okay.
So.
Well, you're an adventure guy. And I want to get into your jet ski adventures too. But okay, so you and your brother, you have any other siblings?
I've got like 6 half siblings. My dad was pretty busy before
okay.
my mom.
Okay. So grew up there. I mean, graduated high school.
Top of my class.
Number 1 in your class, only one in your class.
Yeah.
And then from there, I want to circle back because there you went to Arizona.
I did. I actually after I graduated, we ended up moving to Petersburg, Alaska, and I've been going to Petersburg since I was a little kid. My parents were married there. I had an aunt and uncle there, and I'd been visiting Petersburg off and on since I was probably 3 years old. And so, but after high school, we moved to Petersburg, and then I was into mechanics. I was turning wrenches a lot. I've always been mechanically, just a God-given gift, and was teaching my brother mechanics. And so when he graduated high school, we're like, hey, let's go to school for mechanics. So me and him went down to school for mechanics, and funny enough, I actually met my wife in Phoenix, Arizona. The first night I got to Phoenix, Arizona, and she was from Petersburg. She graduated my brother's class, and I didn't know her. And the funny part was my brother's girlfriend was following him down, and he's like, hey, this other girl from my class is going to be going to school in Phoenix also. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll date her. We'll do the Petersburg thing. And he's like, oh, she's a nice Christian girl. She wouldn't have anything to do with you. And I'm like, Christian guy. Well, I've showed him. We've been married 25 years now. But so I actually, first night I got down to Phoenix, met my wife Tiffany, and it was a few years later before we ever got married. But
Wow,
that's where it all started.
that's awesome. So you went to mechanic.
Got a degree in automotive and diesel mechanics, and moved back to Petersburg afterwards.
Was that always the plan, or that's just where you feel like the Lord was calling you back?
Yeah, no, I kind of felt like that was the plan. I love Alaska, and Petersburg's been good to us. It's a great little community, and planned on going back there. I always knew I was going to be self-employed, though. Especially looking back, even 17, 18 years old, kind of seeing business opportunities, making plans like, oh, when I get older, I'm going to do this, or I could do this, And so then I look back, I realized I always knew I was going to be self-employed, and I have been for a little over 24 years.
Oh, yeah. And you have 3 businesses. We'll get into that. Okay, so now you're back in Petersburg. You have your degree in automotive and diesel.
Yep.
What'd you do?
Well, I went back and I put in my application for a couple of shops there in town, and I was thinking about starting. That really freaked my wife out. I was thinking about starting an aero shaft business, and I'm like, yeah, I think I'm gonna start an aero shaft business. And she's like, whoa, what's going on here? Like, I just married this guy, and he's talking about making arrows for a living in Petersburg. Like, I've never even seen anybody with a bow and arrow, And I was looking at some different opportunities. Matter of fact, on my way home, on our honeymoon, on our way home, I actually bought a power washer from my grandpa. And somebody just reminded me of this a little while ago. And she's like, why are you buying this power washer? And that was the first thing I ever bought that I started renting out and doing power washer jobs. So I guess my self-employment started with a power washer on my honeymoon. I'm lucky she didn't run the first month or so after getting married. But anyways, so yeah, I went back, put in my application, and during that summer, I was commercial fishing. Me and my brother were commercial fishing at the time. So
what were you fishing for?
Salmon.
Okay.
Yeah, we were seining for salmon. So when come about September, we'd get done fishing and we'd go to school. And when the temperature in Phoenix was getting down to about 95, 90, and we go to school till about May when it started climbing back up to 95 degrees, and then we'd drop out of school, go back to Alaska, and go commercial fishing for the summer.
Gosh.
So we after I graduated school, me and Tiffany immediately got married and came home. And I put in a couple of applications, a couple of diesel shops, but it was funny, that summer, my pastor had actually called me up front, was praying for me, and said, hey, I know you've got a couple of different opportunities out there that you've been looking at, but I just feel like God's telling me that there's a third option, a third opportunity that you've never even considered. And so I was like, it's okay. And, it was probably a month later or something, 6 weeks later, I went in to go get my oxygen acetylene filled for my torch, doing some mechanic work. And the old guy there asked me, he knew I'd been going away for school, asked me how school was going, how everything was going. And I said, I'm good. I'm all done. I'm back. I'm settled down here now. And trying to figure out what I'm going to do. I'd like to start a mechanic shop. He was like, oh, maybe you should buy this business. He had a propane business. Yeah, he did oxygen, acetylene, argon, all sorts of stuff. So I was like, well, I'll look into it. And so I ended up, and it was, God totally had his hand in it, just in numerous ways. I saw how he totally laid it out. And I ended up taking over this propane business. And I knew getting into it that I wasn't going to retire doing it, and I wasn't going to get rich doing it, but it was going to be my start. And honestly, for me, the building that I was going to get into, I purchased a business, but the building was coming along as kind of a separate package offer. For me, getting into the building was more important than anything, because I knew that if I had that building, I had a place, and I could do anything I wanted out of there. And so really that gave me the confidence and the start that I could run any business I wanted out of this building.
And that's what I was talking about. Like, I've noticed just like you think like that. Like, that's really sweet. That building was a staple. I mean, it was a marker.
It was. And we actually ended up developing the upstairs in that building. I ended up making it into a house a few years later. And my family, my girls grew up there. We lived upstairs there for 12 years. So I built a house upstairs in the shop, and we had our business down below, and that helped my parents get the house next door. And so that I was more like an industrial type setup. We made a nice yard at my parents' place. Had like 3 trampolines out there. The girls can bounce around. So they just run next door to Grandpa and Grandma's place to play. Yeah.
So that was the third option he was talking about.
That was the third option. Propane business. Never planned on it, but I got into it. I plumb houses for propane. I did fire extinguisher inspections, appliance repair, started with propane appliances. You know, I mean, back in those days, I mean, I'd mow your freaking lawn. I didn't care as long as I was getting my hourly wage. You had to support, yeah. And
Did you know? So you mentioned your pastor. I mean, that was pretty early on, getting back to Petersburg. Did you grow up in church, or where'd you meet the Lord? I mean,
yeah, I did. I got saved when I was about 6 years old. I lived in a logging living in a logging camp. They had a pastor that would fly out there and kind of preach there, and my mom would take me to church. And so I actually got saved when I was like probably 6 years old, right after one of Earl Midkiff's messages there in Labasher Bay. I went home. After we went home, I asked my mom, I said, hey, I want to ask Jesus in my heart. So I was like 6 when I got saved. And growing up, I really felt like I learned my morals and stuff from my mom. And my dad was a great example of what not to do. And he was also a good example of hard work. He wasn't afraid of hard work.
I'm saying he was a logger, huh?
He was a logger. Yeah. But, you know, just personal life stuff, kind of. I always say I got my morals from my mom. Well, my work ethic, but, you know, a little bit of what not to do from my dad. Learn from some of his lessons. But, yeah, so that's where I got saved at. And I never, you know, I don't have any big, huge testimony. I feel like I got more of a tithing testimony than anything. But, you know, didn't get delivered of this or this. Or, and probably got a few things I need delivered of. But we don't have to go there today. No. Yeah. Anyways, and so... yeah, that's I never felt like I wandered far from God, and He's always had a hand in my life, and I've always seen Him there. And
yeah,
you know, sometimes we get sucked into our own stuff a little bit, but He's always been an anchor there for me, and I've always known I could turn to Him.
That's awesome, Charles. So let's talk about for a second, and then we're going to get into the dangerous waters as well. I want to talk about risk and adventure with you on the front end. Because some of the stories that we're going to talk about and some of the, even your business, things you've done, you know, calculated risk, faith, you know, just so let's talk about, because in your life, it seems like you're rowing across a river, going to camp with your brother when you're under 10. So I think adventure and risk has always probably been part of your life. Is that right?
Yeah, it absolutely has been. And, you know, me and my wife were just talking about that the other day. She was talking with someone because I bought an airplane here a few years ago, and I'm just trying to get it back to Petersburg, get up to speed. I'm already looking at another airplane, and I'm at that point in my life, and I've been wanting to get on pilot's license for years, and I'm just at the point that hopefully here in the next few months that I'm going to be able to start chasing my pilot's license. First, my wife's like, you don't need an airplane, you don't have like your license. You can't be flying without your license. But for some years, she's like, they're too crazy to have your pilot's license, and I'm like, No, I'm not. And I'm like, you know, life is just about, I just tell her life is about calculated risks.
Yeah.
And I've got a pretty good calculator.
Yeah.
I really do. I've had a lot of crazy stories, and I've had some close encounters, but always really cautious and don't do something that I'm not comfortable doing.
To the extent, yeah. How do you make it, so how do I want to ask this question? Well, maybe I should ask it this way. When you're making a decision for a business, or when you're making a decision on crazy adventure, how do you handle the fear? Like, let's encourage some listeners in that, because how do you handle the fear in that?
I honestly don't think I handle fear, and my wife says I'm fearless, and that's what scares her sometimes. I mean, I'll go into anything, and when I was younger, I was like, I'll sign my name to $1 million if I know I can make it pay for itself somehow. And that was my goal when I was younger, you know, sign my name to as much personal debt as I can. If I know I can make it pay for itself, and someday I'll have some equity, something to show for it. I never went to business school. But when it comes to business decisions, it's a lot of prayer. When it comes to, you know, running a boat 120 miles in the middle of nowhere, when it comes to crossing the Bering Straits on jet skis, it just comes to the experience I have. I mean, we do all sorts of crazy stuff. I mean, we blowing holes in the ground big enough to park your car in, you know, and just camping, hiking, you know.
And then being in Alaska and among the wildlife too. Imagine there's an element of danger just in all that, even how remote you are.
Yeah.
So you never really were taught that, I guess, to be super afraid of stuff.
No. just about problem solving. And you got to be careful sometimes, and you got to proceed with caution sometimes. But more than anything, it's just about being spirit filled.
Yeah.
And trying to make sure you're taking the time to hear that voice, that Holy Spirit guiding you. And you asked about business decisions. A lot of business decisions, I do pray about them. Whether it's buying a property that just seems impossible for me to buy, or taking on the job of moving a 3-story house or something like that, or even jet skiing around the world, doing that. I pray about a lot of those, and a lot of times my thing is I just pray, Lord, your word says that you can open doors that no man can open. You close doors that no man can close. And more than anything, I want your will over my life. And if this is a door that I'm going to pursue this, and if this is a door that needs to be closed, just slam it in my face and I'll move on with a good attitude about it. And, but otherwise I'm going to pursue it and just look for your favor. And I've had buildings that I've purchased, properties that just seem so beyond me that I'm like, okay, Lord, I'm turning this over to you. I don't personally have the faith for this. I have a desire here. I feel like this is calling me, but you're going to have to make it happen, because I know it's not me and it's going to be all you. And so when it happens, it's like a natural high. It's like, thank you, Lord. He showed up.
And you turn it over, man. I noticed that about you. How do you, because I found myself a lot of times, like if the Lord's asking me to let go of something, I can for a season, but then I'm just like, touch it over. You know what I'm saying? How do you let it go?
I think when it's time, he'll put on your heart. Usually starts with my wife. My wife's like, let it go. Eventually I listen to her. I'm like, I don't normally just rush into things. Maybe I do, but I don't normally rush out of things. And I don't mind walking away from something. And, these days we've had multiple different businesses. We've done different stuff. And these days we're really being more, how would you put it? Anyways, these days we're being more intentional about what we do and looking for God's favor and his guidance. And I've got rid of, and I've seen God bring things into my life for a period, and they made me a bunch of money at the time, but I'm like, no, now's the time to move on. Now they're starting to, they were great for a period, and now they're a burden. And, so
you're super open-handed with it.
Yeah. And nowadays, I can see, okay, well, it's time to sell that. We had a boat that we sold for $200,000 more than we bought it for. We bought the boat, ran it for a couple of years, and there was 2 specific relationships during that time period with guys I worked with that I was able to develop and be there with them for, a tough time in their life, or they just totally, came to know the Lord through that. And I look back, I'm like, you know what, Lord, I was like, I think you put that boat in my life just for those 2 guys. And on top of that, I wasn't even trying to sell the boat, and somebody called me up and was like, hey, you want to sell your boat? And I said, no. And then wife's like, you sure you don't want to sell that boat? I'm like, no. Okay, well, maybe I got to, so, and I got to think about it, I'm like, it probably, I like it, but it'll probably make life simpler. I call her back, okay, we'll sell the boat. Yeah. And we ended up making money off the boat, and it was the right time. It moved on. So, we're really sometimes we do hold on to things a little longer than we should, but, and sometimes, things can get tough. Business can get tough sometimes. It's not because we've done anything wrong, but I've seen times where our finances got tough and I have to buckle down, and I got to lay somebody off. I got to drop some stuff out, but I've also seen it and felt like God just showed me, no, I'm pruning you for what's next. This is what's holding you back. It's time to make that next move. And so that's why a lot of times I'm okay with getting rid of stuff or moving on or closing out of business, even if it's, just pay the bills and give it to somebody else and walk away, because I know he's got something bigger for me.
Because you see it as an opportunity. That's why I love how you think differently.
Opportunity.
Yeah.
And this year, like the Alaskan Legend, yeah,
tell us about the boat. Since you mentioned it, tell us about the yacht.
The Alaskan Legend, 84 foot. It's a beautiful boat, got classic lines. It was 1970. It was ahead of its time. It went through a couple of updates back in 2004. Back in 2013, 14, they dropped about $1 million into the boat, repowered it, and the boat's it's aluminum. It's absolutely phenomenal, and we got super blessed. We were super blessed on the price. God totally had his hand in the financing of the boat, and the funny thing is when I was like 18 years old, whenever I travel, stop in the airport, I get, Yachty magazine. I look at yachts and I imagine, you don't think about your wife and your family. I'm like, me and my brother and our buddies, we could totally buy a boat like this, man. It's going to be like total bachelor pad, And so here I am, just turning 50, and
MTV Cribs.
yeah, totally. It's like, come pick my boat, And so, yeah, but we bought this boat in November of 2021, and just the way it worked out that we got into, I wanted to get into the charter business. I wanted to do something with my family, and we had been looking at buying a lodge, and we'd looked at a couple of lodges. I actually, in 2019, took my whole family, a lodge I wanted to buy. The guy's like, he had the wisdom to say, why don't you bring your family, come work here for the summer? Because I was ready to sign the paperwork. I was about ready to throw money his way.
Thank you, Lord, for that.
And he's like, come bring your family, work here for the summer, make sure it's the right fit. And that was his wisdom. And it would have worked out fine financially, but it wouldn't have been the right fit for me and my family.
Yeah.
And from there, from looking at the lodge, I'm like, no, there's so many moving parts. And that's when I started pursuing the yacht business, because it's more intimate.
Yeah.
We do 7-night, 8-day trips, but we can do custom trips any day.
Yeah.
But
what's the living quarters? Tell us about how many
5 staterooms on the boat. One's for crew and 4 for guests.
Okay.
And so we can do 8 guests comfortably. I mean, we can slap more kids on there. We could do 9 or 10. But typically, 4 staterooms, 2 per room. And we just take people out on the experience of a lifetime. And up close and personal. Not on a boat with 2,000 of your closest friends, a big cruise ship, but it's just up close and personal. You get to know them, and we go bump icebergs, and literally bump icebergs. Take a picture on an iceberg. Whether it's getting them out on a charter to do some fishing, or whether it's bear viewing them at whale watching. We go to hot springs, and when we get together with just the guys groups, we go build a fire. We're cooking stick on a meat on the beach, and shooting guns, blowing stuff up, because that's in most of us. It's a natural thing to want to shoot stuff and blow stuff up, and so we bust out the guns, and we bust out the tannerite, and whether it's blowing up icebergs or anything else, I'm going to be a little discreet about things. But we go out and have a good time and just do what we feel like God designed us and built us to do.
It looks like a dream. The trip, I've seen pictures of it in the boat. It looks like, it's a lifetime experience.
It really is. And the cool part about it is, and I'm still laying out what this boat and this business looks like. I know God called me to this boat, and even the business, I've had some Holy Spirit encounters about this boat. I'm the kind of guy that can go 10 years without crying.
Yeah.
But when the presence of God hits me, when I have a supernatural encounter, I'm laughing, I'm crying. I guess not right on my nose. I'm like the baby, And there's just no denying that, when the presence of God hits you. But I've literally had a couple of different Holy Spirit encounters, or somebody starts speaking into my life about this boat, and about, it's like, hey, it's like, he's like, I've, Philip Ward, close friend of mine, Philip and Amy Ward, and just telling him what I got going on. And he's like, bro, he was like, I just feel like, he's like, it's about personal relationships. And he's like, God gave you, we got a nice 28-foot Duckworth offshore, twin 200s, take people out and do stuff. He's like, you've blessed us. And he's like, you bless people with that boat. He's like, I see it. You've been a good steward of that. And he's like, and I feel like this is a time. And he shared some verses about relationships and developing relationship. And you've been faithful in the small things. And now he's moving you to the big things. And when he started talking about the relationship stuff, just the conversation, the word he had for me, the presence of God hit me. I got teared up and crying. And just like, oh my gosh, I wasn't expecting that. And then my close friend of mine, Greg Cook, he's got a 55-footer, and he had owned a lodge that I'd looked at when I was looking at buying lodges. Super neat Christian guy, and we've I started talking to him about and telling him about this word, and this was like 3 weeks later. And as I'm telling him about this, it's like the presence of God. There it is, and we're hooked up and crying with Greg over the phone, and 2 different times talking with Greg, it's like the Holy Spirit counter came, and one night our pastors were over, and just came over as our church group, kind of praying, or hey, what's everybody's needs, little dinner, little fellowship. make sure that everybody's doing well, and praying. Then he's like, he's praying about the boat and the business, and I'm just sitting over there on the left seat at my house, and he's praying for me and the boat and the business, and he's like, I see you. He's like, I see you on the boat. He's like, I see you speaking into pastors' lives, and I can almost feel it right now because I'm like, who am I to be speaking into a pastor's life? You know, I could take them out for a good time, but who am I to speak into a pastor's life? Encourage him. But as he tells me this, the presence of God hits me, and I start getting choked up. I'm just like, I'm just overwhelmed. So I've had multiple different encounters, and you know, when Pastor Ed came up and Jake Friels came up, we just did a trip with all these guys, and then afterwards, Pastor Ed came to church with us. Everybody came to church Sunday morning before they had to get on the jet, and he had to leave on the earlier jet. I went and dropped him off. I was like, I just kind of felt like I had a word for him. And then later, he's like, I didn't even realize it, but I looked back, I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I was actually speaking into a pastor's life because he's like, oh my gosh, you had no idea. And I was like, I kind of realized that, that was happening. And the crazy part is we'll get into my jet ski adventures, but so I bought the boat in 2021 and did my first charters in 2022, 2023. But I was doing my jet ski adventures my first year in 2011 and 2012, 13. But we were on the boat this year, and the clients, they were talking about dangerous waters, and I think I might have been with Jake and those guys, and they wanted to watch some of the shows. So we pull up on Amazon Prime, look up Dangerous Waters, and we're watching the Petersburg section. When we leave Petersburg, and Cade's like, "Hey, that was the Alaskan Legend." I was like, "What are you talking about?"
Way.
And he's like, "No, rewind it." And we go back and we rewind, and here is a picture. I'm almost getting goosebumps. Think back. Here is a video the cameraman got of me going by on the jet ski and on the dock, and in the background, tied up to the dock, was the Alaskan Legend. I didn't know that boat existed. This is 10 years before I bought it. The boat was not based out of Petersburg. It would have been there just visiting or tied up for a week or bringing people to town and back out. So that boat was not normally in our town, and I never knew that boat existed. But looking back, I was like, I ran my jet ski past that boat 10 years before I ever bought it. And I felt like I saw that picture. I'm like, that's me. That's my boat 10 years before I ever bought it. Yeah. And it's like the Lord just told me, he's like, I've got a plan. I mean, it was like an aha moment. I just realized it's like the Lord knew that was going to be in my future, that he had that plan for me long before any of this ever came along. So
yeah, that's so sweet.
And at this point in the game, I've had different people on the boat. I'm doing different stuff on the boat, but I haven't, it's like, how are you going to market it? And my wife's like, when I first got the boat, I was like, should we bring it in the boat? She's like, are you kidding me? She said, I don't think it's any coincidence that you got a boat named the Alaskan Legend. She's like, I think that needs to be how you market yourself. Nobody's jet skied the coast of Alaska before, jet skied to Russia, the stuff you do, move a 3-story house, whatever. She's like, I kind of feel like you're supposed to just market, yourself, your boat as. She's like, I think the name's appropriate. And I'm like, at first I didn't think much of it. I was like, it's kind of romantic. I love the name of the boat. So the Alaska Legend is kind of a part of the family now, but just seeing that the plan that God had with it, and I haven't wanted to jump into offering it for, photography trips or this or that. And I've always had a heart for wanting to do something for pastors and with pastors. And even if it's feeling like, I'm going to bring in these clients and make this money so that I can bless these guys, bring these guys in on trips. But I really feel like it's supposed to, I want to be doing men's ministry stuff, and it's like, whether we do marriage class, seminar stuff, whatever. My wife does a lot of that. My wife's absolutely amazing. And she does, does health coaching and does a lot of different stuff. And we've been told, you might even need another boat or even another bigger boat. And they're tent warm up like that. You don't got to tell me twice, but and like that's what they told my wife. Like, I feel like God says He loves you a yacht, And he loves the yacht.
That's gonna be
I'm like, yeah, I hope it's like 120 foot worth of love,
That's awesome because I was going to ask you like, what's your heart for the boat? I mean, we heard it. Like you really are focusing on, like you have a heart for pastors, for men, for
Yeah, I want to see guys growing up knowing who they are, and that's where I think I have the self-confidence. Sometimes I walk into deals sometimes or pursue deals, and even situations, whether it's getting out flight on the plane that you want, I'm like, I walk into it. I don't want to say it's cocky, and it's not because I'm anything special, but because I know who my father is.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important for men, whether it's businessmen. I think for women as well, men or women, knowing who you are and who your father is. And it's like, my father is a king, and you're sitting in my seat. And so, but just going into deals like this, his word says that he made us in his image. And you look at the love and what you want for your kids, and you want the best for your kids. And why would we not think that God doesn't want the best for us? And so sometimes, but more than anything, I want his will.
Yeah.
And that's what I seek. And I'm like, if that's your will, Lord. And I've had property deals that look like they were walking away from me before. And I just turned it over to him. I said, you know what, Lord? I'm like, my heart's desire is that property. I've got a plan for it, but if that's not on your will, I don't want it. I'm okay with that, and I'll be fine with that. It looks like that deal's going away, but this is a case of, only you can open that door, close that door. And so I just turned it over to him, and if I didn't get it, I would have been, I wouldn't have been disappointed about it. I'd put some time into dreaming about it and walking the property.
Well, that's free.
And they came back to me and said, hey, yeah, we had somebody else, maybe cash buyer, somebody else trying to buy it, but we want to sell it to you.
You have 100 stories like that.
I do. I really do.
Unstuck Coaches hates it when movement and progress in a person's life or business is stuck, or frozen, or slowed, or just stopped altogether. Well, we have found a solution. Unstuckcoaches.com. They offer a variety of coaching services to get you or your business moving again. Check out unstuckcoaches.com.
Hey, y'all. I just want to make an observation. When I see someone going through a legal situation, it seems like there are way too many unknowns. Well, the Allen firm provides legal guidance so that you can make a great decision, come to a resolution, and be at peace. For more information about the Allen firm, visit allenlawfirm.com.
You rode a jet ski to Russia. Is that right?
That's right.
Has anybody else done that besides you, your brother, and a couple of guys?
No.
So
no. There has been since then. Most people don't know this, but we were the first ones to ever jet ski from Alaska to Russia. Nobody had ever crossed it on jet skis before.
Is it reason for that, or are you just like, we could do it?
Reason for that. It's one of the roughest spots water in the country. I mean, the first time we attempted, we didn't make it. We were rolling 15-plus footers out on the Bering Strait in cold temperatures, and we lost a motor in a jet ski. We couldn't tow it, and then we ended up with 5 guys on 3 jet skis, and one of them was half full of water. They'd rolled it over a couple of times, and we had to abandon a jet ski out on the Bering Straits of season 1.
So back up, because people may not know. So let's talk about it was in 2011-12. There was a series called Dangerous Waters. We've talked about it a few times.
Yep.
That they made about this adventure of y'all, right?
Yeah, and this was just a matter of, I was, one summertime I was at home, a guy named Stephen Mall, a good friend of mine, he had this vision. He had an advertising company, and he discovered jet skis and put on a dry suit and not just run around your lake. And he went out underneath the Golden Gate, was taken out on the coast, and then it jet ski to Catalina Island. He's like, I want to do a jet ski show. I want to, he felt like he had the connections and had the dream and vision of jet skiing around the world or not around the world. At the time, it was going jet ski the Nile and the Amazon and all these famous places. And so what he did was he said, okay, well, if I'm going to do a TV show, I'm going to actually have to go out and do something to get somebody to believe that we can do it. And so he had some California news crews kind of following what he was doing. He's in marketing and advertising, and And so him and a couple of buddies drove up to Prince Rupert, Canada, and jet skied on up through the Northwest Passage. They jet skied up to Glacier Bay, and on their way back, they broke down outside of Petersburg. And he felt like his trip was over. He got towed into Petersburg and couldn't get anybody to work on the jet ski. And the guy down at the field dock's like, hey, I know a guy with a propane shop that has had a couple of jet skis, and he can jerry rig just about anything. You want me to see if he'll help you? And he's, crying. He's like, yes, please. And so he calls me up, and I was like, I knew the situation he was in, and I'm like, he's in the middle of nowhere. He's got no resources, and this was a big trip for him. I just done a 4,500 mile motorcycle trip the year before, and I was like, what would I do if I was in the middle of nowhere and had bike issues? And so I basically stopped what I was doing, helped him out. We pulled the jet ski out, checked it out. I worked on a jet ski till midnight that night, and just fellowshipped with them throughout the day and talked with them. And I was like, and I jumped on a jet ski before and done like 60-mile run by myself, in Southeast Alaska. And so jet skiing Southeast Alaska was on my bucket list of things I was going to do. And this guy was doing it. So I said, hey, if you ever got any more big adventures coming up, I'd love to, rent a jet ski, borrow a jet ski. I'd love to, go do the Suez Canal, go to New Mexico, wherever, go do something crazy. And just got to know him that day, saved his trip. It was like a miracle fix when he got back to Sea-Doo. They're like, how in the world did the guy do this? And then I stayed in touch with him, make sure that he made it back safely. And he called me up a few days later. And he's like, dude, you saved my trip. And he's like, hey, I want to do this. I think I've got the resources. I want to do this show, this extreme jet skiing show. And I want you to be one of the main characters on the show, the extreme jet ski mechanic. And I was like, well, I don't know what to think about the whole TV thing, but I'm down with the adventure. And so I talked to the wife about it, and she's like, what's the chances of somebody from Petersburg getting a reality show? And so it's one of those deals, what, Word, if this is you, let it happen. If not, I'll go jet skiing again someday, and that's really kind of what it was. And so I actually flew down on my own dime, and we went out under the Golden Gate and did some jet skiing so we can get some footage, worked me into the promo. I helped pay for the first promo and just start bringing stuff together and help name the show. We did it on the road. But before we went down and actually had named the show, we actually had a sit-down interview with Discovery, and they ended up not taking it. But before that happened, I had been in touch with Steven talking about different stuff. And one night, me and the wife fell asleep in the living room. She fell asleep on the couch. We're watching Forrest Gump. My girls were in bed, and my wife fell asleep on the couch, and I'm sitting there just watching Forrest Gump, and I'm getting along in the show. It's 11:30 at night. I'm tired. I'm about ready to go to bed. There's not much going on upstairs. I've been watching TV, and I'm watching, and I'm like, my life has been a lot like that. And I compared my life to Forrest Gump. I'm like, I have had opportunities just drop in my lap, and like I was fueling Alaska Airlines at the time. Alaska Airlines has been a great opportunity, and that's why I'm so loyal to that company. But I'm like, I've just had these opportunities that have just dropped into my lap, and I've had so many different things. And all of a sudden, the presence of God hits me. It falls on me. And it's like I could see these, and I'd already had a desire for like lodges and doing like youth camp type of stuff, and thinking that I'd have to have a high-end lodge with high-end clients to be able to do stuff with, more like pastors or kids on the side. But that was like, all of a sudden when the present God hit me, it's like I could see the TV show, I could see the jet skis, and it's like it emerged. And it was like, it's like these dreams from here and here and here. It's like they all came together like a puzzle. Yeah. And it's like they just came together, and it was almost like a light bulb came on. And it's like I could almost hear him just say, I'm giving this to you. Yeah. And the presence of God, when it hits you like that, he's like, I'm giving this to you. And I'm just thanking him. I'm crying, but it's like he just downloaded. Is all about timing. It's like, here's my wife, supportive. She sleep on the couch. I've got 3 little girls. I've got 3 girls, and I'm like, a year ago we wouldn't have been in a point in life, and just saw how the timing of where my girls were at and my family is at, and how it all just tied in together. And man, I was just wrecked in the presence of God. I was praying over her while she's sleeping and just thanking God for her. And go in, just praying over my girls while they were sleeping and just thanking him for everything he's done and just repenting of stuff. I'm one of the guys that like be sitting in church listening to a pastor. Before you know it, I'm building something in my head. I'm figuring out how I'm going to move this 3-story house. I'm not even paying attention to what's going on. And every once in a while I catch myself, I'm like, oh, freaking pay attention, Charles. Pay attention. And I actually remembered repenting to him, Lord, just forgive me of this. Forgive me of sitting in church and daydreaming about other things. And it's just like he told me I'm giving this Eve. I just felt him say, hey, I made you that way.
Yeah.
It's okay. Don't beat yourself up over it. I made you that way. And so it was a total Holy Spirit encounter, and I just got drunk in the Holy Spirit. That next morning I woke up, one of my best friends came over, Darby came over, brought us coffee, and it's like I didn't say anything. I couldn't say anything. I'm like, and then the devil wants to start coming in. Did that really happen? Did that? I'm like, dude, I was crying. It's been like 8 or 10 years. I'm like, I know that was God. You're not taking that away from me. I know what that was. And like literally it was about 10:30 that morning. My wife was getting ready. I got her alone in the bathroom without the kids. And I'm like, hey, you're not going to believe what happened to me last night. And as I start telling her about this experience, the presence of God just falls all over me again. And it was awesome. Same thing. I told one of our elders about 3 weeks later at church. And the presence of God just falling all over me. And I'm like, and that's why I know he's just confirming. So when we rolled down to California to go do this interview, I told the guys, I said, hey, I had a Holy Spirit encounter about this. I was like, this is going to happen. I said, I'm not saying it's discovery. Yeah. I'm not saying it's going to go the way we have planned, because usually he's got a better plan for us than we do. But this is going down.
It's going to happen.
And I was like, I have no doubt.
Yeah, so you're down in California. You had these like experiences, with your Lord. How did you go from there to actually filming and going and doing this? And what was the rhythm? How did it work?
Everything progressed after going with Discovery. We ended up we built coming back from that interview is when we decided to name the show Dangerous Waters. That way, we weren't stuck to a certain brand of jet ski, or if it was on the water, if we're going to end up in Africa or Australia or something with those jet skis with wheels on the bottom, it's like, it's have to do with water. So we came up with Dangerous Waters, and we named it that night, and everything just slowly progressed. We had we ended up coming up with a network that wanted to run the show. And then we had a company that was going to be a financial backer. And they talked to us. We had a lot of group stuff and things. But as summer's coming up, it's like there was no money showing up that wasn't showing up. And they're talking a lot of talk, but we never saw any money out of it, coming from it. And we just, as a group, me, Stephen Mall, my brother Wes Davis, Andrew Mazzella, one of friends, Pat McGregor, we're the original 5 guys that did the show. We, get together like, hey, look, I don't think these guys are going to come through. Obviously not on this timeline. We can't depend on them. And we're like, we're going to have to make this happen ourselves. We have because we're supposed to have gotten paid to go do this.
Yeah.
And we're like, we have a network that'll run our show. When are we ever going to have this opportunity? So if we're going to do it, we're going to have to pull together. So we all went out knowing that we didn't have a paycheck coming from it. And my brother Steve gave up everything he had, put it into the show. My brother was able to take an equipment loan against some of his equipment. He put up $50,000, which got us out of the driveway. We never would have even left California if it wasn't for McGrath West. And then as we got into it, a friend of mine, Perry Allen, worked with GCI. He lined us up. GCI is a big cable provider for cell phone cable in Alaska. They ended up sponsoring us, buying the rights to the show in Alaska. And so that hooked us up with some cash. Andrew Mazzella, we lost a jet ski. Andrew Mazzella, put $25,000 or something, put a jet ski on his credit card, so we get this jet ski not brought out to us, but delivered to Homer, where we go, switch it all over, a week or so later, that machine only had, I mean, I could just go on for hours. We ended up sinking that jet ski in the Gulf of Alaska, brand new jet ski, and I had to get another one. I mean, just ridiculous stuff.
So what was the plan then? You're going to say, hey, you really did. Y'all were going to be like the 5 of you guys were wanting to ride across the Bering Sea, across the strait to Russia?
Well,
was that their first plan? Or?
Well, the very first plan is when it came together and we were figuring out what we were going to do. He's like, we're going to jet ski all these famous places, the Amazon, the Nile, the Suez, Bighorn, Africa. And I said, hey, I want to be the first one to jet ski from Alaska to Russia. I know that we could do it. And he's like, all right, Alaska to Russia it is.
Hang on, why do you know that you could do it?
Because it's about an 80-mile crossing. The water is rougher than crap, but it's 80 miles. Like, we can pack enough fuel that we can do that.
Okay.
And they're like, all right, Alaska to Russia it is. We'll put it on the list.
Charles,
And that's the way it came down to. It came down to money and said, hey, because of finances, we're going to do a Russia crossing first, but everybody's into Alaska right now. Alaska Skate Troopers, Flying Wild Alaska, all these different shows.
Yeah.
And so they're like, we're gonna jet ski, through Alaska, trying to get through Russia. And like, all right, let's do it. So we just kind of all pulled together, part of that team, and everything kind of snowballed and developed to that point. So we left Ballard. We jet skied season 1. We jet skied from Seattle up to where I live in Petersburg, did a bunch of retrofits on the skis, which I had planned, me being the MacGyver of the group.
Yeah.
I'm like, we need some lights on the skis.
Yeah.
We need to build a fuel rack on the back so we carry jerry jugs. We didn't have a support boat. We started out with a few jerry jugs ratchet strapped on the back of a jet ski, but we built a fuel rack so we could haul with what was in the ski and on the back deck. We could haul about 54 gallons of fuel, and I put a pump inside the jet ski so that if you just move the gas cap on your jet ski, that you can pump the fuel from the tank into your machine out on the open water. And so we did a bunch of retrofits in Petersburg, and then we jet skied all the way up to Haines, where we had a motorhome pick us up, because Haines up to Anchorage we had no water support. We were running on our own. And there's far enough run. So we motorhomed up to Anchorage, and we left Anchorage, jet skied Homer, Kodiak, every little place between all the way up to Bristol Bay and up to False Pass, the beginning of the Aleutians, and up to Bristol Bay. And by that time we were about out of time. The weather's turned, and we had been at it for almost 2 months. And
how far was
our skis? Oh, I forget. I think we did 10,000. No, we did like 4,500 miles season 1, something crazy.
Okay.
But we were way the heck up there. But we'd have breakdowns. I mean, we learned a lot about taking care of our skis. We beat the crap out of these things. I mean, like the fiberglass is coming off the bottom of the skis type of deal. I mean, we're fixing these things in the surf, sinking jet skis, and it was ridiculous. But we were pretty hard on them. And so we made it up to Bristol Bay, and by that time we got up there, we're like, we're not to Russia yet. And they're like, our skis were trashed. The wives were wondering when we're coming home. The weather's turning on us. We're going north. Everyone else is headed south. And so we got Northern Air Cargo to sponsor us, and they flew out to King Salmon, Bristol Bay, and they loaded our jet skis in a 737 and flew them up to Nome. And so we flew up to Nome and kind of got geared up, and we jet skied from Nome all the way up to Wells, which is the westernmost point of the continent, and we ended up trying to cross the Bering Straits. Russia was our goal, and we're like, okay, well, we'll just go to Big Diomede, and it's like, we didn't have no plan. We didn't have no visas. We're like, basically our plan was like, let's roll up, jump on the beach at Big Diomede, take a leak, go take a piss on Russian soil, and race back before we get shot. That was about our plan. And we could say we did it. And so we didn't make it, though. The Bering Straits is what makes it so dangerous. The worst part is from Wales out to the Diomede Islands, because there's about 4 different currents that cross through there. And so we're rolling some 15-plus footers out there. And
is that vertical? But
no, they're not laid out. They're like stair steps. If you ever get the opportunity to watch the show, it might not look like that. But if you got enough time on the water, because the camera looks across the top of the water, doesn't see the highs, doesn't see the lows. But every once in a while, you'll see a wave wash out, and you'll realize, oh, dang, I can kind of see that. Yeah. And so And you'll go up, like we're going up a wave. It's like go up and a level up. And about the time we're getting to the top of the wave, I mean, they're feeling like they're stalling out like an airplane. I mean, you're just starting to dog. We make it over the top of a wave and you start coming back down and you're almost dropping off stair stepping.
Wow.
Because these waves are spread out. But we're hitting 15 plus footers and some of them out there. And we lost the motor in a jet ski. And then, so we ended up with 5 guys on 3 jet skis. One was half full of water. We had to cut our jet ski loose on the Bering Straits, and we had to call it. We were 10, 12 miles out from the Diamond Island. We're looking at them. That was our goal, and we had to call it. We had to turn around and go back, and it was a good thing we did, because once we got back, the newest ski we had, computer went out on it. There's nothing you can do about electronic out there. And so we ended up towing that. So we ended up with 5 guys on 2 running jet skis to get back. We had to tow one of the guys back on the broken jet ski. And so that was season 1. After that, we got sponsorships and things started rolling. We had somebody buy into the show. Jimmy Anderson, bless his heart, he came in. It was more like a hobby for him. Got things rolling and got us going. And so, and at that point, it developed, okay, what are we really going to do here, guys? And it's like, we've just made this enormous trek, and it's like, nobody's ever jet skied around the world, and we want to explore this. So that's when it snowballed into jet ski around the world. So, we came back, and in season 2, we came back with visas this time and planned on jet skiing back over to Russia, starting in Nome again, over to Russia, down through Russia, into Japan for season 1. But, we finally made it across the Bering Straits over to Russia just to get met by the military. They had about 15 minutes notice that we were coming. Basically, we rolled up on a KGB military base running more sophisticated equipment than they had, and they only had about 10, 15 minutes notice that we were going to be there, and kind of caught them off guard. So, and it turned into an international deal. It was front page of the Moscow Times, New York Times, LA Times, Wall Street Journal. Oh yeah, my buddy's in Seattle. It was on the second page of the Seattle paper. And we had people lobbying to get us to be able to go through Russia. But I think there was just too much media publicity on it back then. And so they turned, we were supposedly prosecuted for entering restricted areas on tourist visas. And so they, turned around and sent us back. So we're like, well, if we're going around the world, I guess we're going that way. And I went back and we got some guns and some gear and jet ski. That year we jet skied all the way over the top of Alaska into Canada. So season 3, we started back in Canada, did about 2,500 miles on the Northwest Passage before we got iced in for a couple of days and had to have the Canadian Coast Guard. They decided it'd be best to pull us out at that point because they had a boat in the area, which a boat in the area there is still a day away. Yeah, and then after that, I did 3 seasons, but after that, I felt like I was being called to stay home, take care of my family, and take care of my business. Yeah. And but I had Petersburg guys on the show for every year since then. I mean, for the rest of the season since then, and now that the show's over, Stephen Molly's got Dangerous Waters Adventures and runs jet ski tours out of Juneau, Alaska.
Where can we watch it anyway? Right now,
Amazon.
It
used to be free, but now you can watch it. I recommend the first 3 seasons.
Yeah, they're the best.
But no. So
okay, cool.
That's been some of the adventure, and we even do some trips with Dangerous Waters Adventures with their jet ski adventures and the Alaskan Legend. At times, bring clients in. Some clients have never even seen the show. They don't know me from anybody, and some of them come in and they're all excited because they're big fans. So
That's amazing, man.
Anyway, it's been an adventure.
So, how many miles do you think you've ridden on a jet ski in your life?
I've done probably 10,000 miles, and so probably rode a jet ski more than the majority of the population, 1% of the population.
Oh, I can't imagine who's ridden more than you.
There's 2 guys. That would be Stephen Mull and that would be Pat McGregor. And Stephen Mull says he's done his jet ski tours. I mean, the miles he puts down every year, the guy probably got 100,000 miles on the water. No joke.
That's wild.
Anyways.
Okay. Well, so as we kind of started heading toward the end, I want to talk about your tithing testimony, and how important that is, because we didn't get too much into the businesses.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do that for the next time we connect, or maybe on your Alaskan Legend.
I say we just film it in the wheelhouse, in the captaincy on the Alaskan Legend.
We're going to take you up on that, I guarantee it. So, but out of your three businesses, I mean, you have a rental, a jet fuel, you have, an investment business, and then the marine business. But a big deal of all of those, you said, and when we were talking the other day, a lot of things changed and happened when you were tithing. And I just want to hear your testimony as we kind of
Absolutely. And when it comes to tithing, there's one thing I've learned, and I can tell you, is you can't outgive God. That's just simple fact. And so I started paper routes when I was, living in a logging camp when I was a kid, and my mom taught me about tithing. I tithed off my paper routes when I was a little kid, and my very first paper route I tithed off of. I get down to Puyallup, Washington. I decide I want a paper route, and boom, I get one like that. I've got a paper route in my area. I tithe off it. I've supernatural favor for the jobs when I was a kid, and I saw that. I recognized that. My next paper route I was in Eugene, Oregon, 15 years old, knew I was going to be coming back to Alaska because we'd spent a couple of years down there, and I wanted to buy a deer. I wanted a gun for deer hunting. Nobody's going to buy me one, and so I decided to get a paper route. And I called the guy up. I was like, "Hey, I want to get in." They're like, "Okay, we'll put you on the list." What do you know? 2 days later, they're like, "Hey, we had something open up, and we'd like to come interview you." And so, literally, like 2 or 3 days after I tell this guy I want a paper route, he gets me a paper route in my area. He comes over, meets with me and my mom. And the guy's over there. And I said, "Hey, you know what? I've been thinking about it. I want a double route. I want a route next to my route." And he's like, "Wow, those don't happen very often. Those don't come up very often."
For me.
And my dad, yeah, you don't know who my dad is. He's the king. And anyways, and this guy's like, "Okay, love your enthusiasm. We'll let you know." This guy doesn't know that I've only got about 3 months, 3 to 4 months that I'm going to be able to work for him before I go to Alaska. I'm keeping my mouth shut there. But anyways, so he gave me the job for the paper. All right, we're going to do this paper route. He leaves. About 2 hours later, he calls me back and said, "Hey, you know what? Something just came up, and we got a paper route for you right next to your other. We can give you a double route side by side in your neighborhood." And so I've always been a tither, and I've seen God's favor in that. And God gave me this business. And I'm the type of person that I would tithe when I was going to college. I remember going to school, me and my brother putting ourselves through school. And I remember having $7 for my name one time. My brother calls me up, and he was like, "Hey," he's like, come to the movies with me and my girlfriend." I'm like, "Dude, I've only got like $7 left." He was like, "Oh, come on, like, let's go with good one." I'm like, "All right." So I spent my last $7 to my name to go to the movies, and you know what? It was freaking Star Wars, and I fell asleep. I slept through almost the whole movie. I was like, that was stupid. That wasn't very wise, but I knew, hey, it's okay. I know who my provider is, and he's going to take care of me. And so I've always never had a problem running it to the line. Probably more so than I should at times, but he's always blessed me. And I knew he had his hand in my business, but when I got going with my business, trying to expand my business, trying to make payroll, this and that, for the longest time, I wasn't tithing like I should. And I'm like, "Oh, well, God gave me this business, so when it starts taking off, and then I'm going to be a total provider because I can see myself supporting the ministry a whole lot more and stuff like that." And it didn't really work like that. I had 3 different businesses, and when one business was going, another one was struggling. I meant robbing Peter to pay Paul. And to me and my wife, we did youth group. We had led Young Life, and we did in the Assembly of the God Church. We led youth group, and we bought ice cream and stuff like that, and we wouldn't get reimbursed. I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of my tithing, I'm tithing my time and this and that." And at the end of the year, one point I got back my statement for what my giving was for the year, and it was $900. And I looked at that, and I said, "That's pathetic."
Yeah.
I felt a little convicted. I looked at that, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize it was that low." And I don't mind talking about money. I don't mind. I'm an open book. And so I was like, $900. I'm like, that's pathetic. I'm not giving. I either believe in tithing or I don't.
Yeah.
And at that time, I had a bookkeeper that was like, "Charles, we used to live off my wife's hair money, for our personal, my business, go back to business." She's like, "Charles, you need to start taking home some money." And so my bookkeeper on Fridays would make sure I had just recently started this, giving me an envelope of $250, and every Friday I'd take home to my family. And so when I got convicted about that tithing, I was like, you know what? From now on, whatever cash I have on Sunday, I'm tithing that. Whether I took my wife to the movies, whether we bought groceries, got, a present for the kid or whatever, whether I had, $35, whether I had $150, whether I had $220 in my pocket, literally, I started giving all the cash I had on Sunday that was left over that I got from the $250 on Friday on Sunday. And I remember we had a guest speaker come, Darren Lindley. We had this guest speaker come, and they take a tithe. And for some reason, I don't even know why, it might have been a job I got paid for or something. For some reason, I had $450 in my pocket. And I'm like, heck, I'm like, dude, I just tithed half as much as I did for the entire year last year. I'm like, I love this. Yeah. And that was my attitude. And I gave it. And with all of a sudden, within a period of like 6 weeks, it's like things started changing. And money started coming at us. When I say money started coming at us, I mean, people always assume because I own 3 businesses. I've had people way older than me say, well, I try and give them a piece of advice. And I'm like, well, if I had as much money as you did, and I'm like, are you kidding? If you had as much debt as I did, the whole debt. And so nobody ever gave us anything or helped us with anything. And then all of a sudden, Tiffany's mom's like, hey, this was from your dad. This was something, and give it to your sibling. Gave us like $1,500 or a couple $1,000. And then all of a sudden somebody comes over and is like, gives us an envelope like, hey, this was left for you at the church, and it's the envelope with $1,000 cash in it. And it wasn't even a church that we went to. And then my mom comes over like, hey, somebody left this envelope over at the house. I've been over at my house for a couple of weeks now, and I keep meaning to give it to you. And it's just got her name on it. And here's it's like another $1,000 cash. And like all of a sudden, within no time, we had like $6,000 given to us. And I'm like, this is crazy. And I'm like, this is nuts. And so I'm like, I have not seen breakthrough and I know it's related to my tithing because it opens doors spiritually, and it opens those doors. And so I was like, okay, my business is going to start doing $250 a week. I'm just going to write a check out of my business. And it's like, I started paying that $250 a week. And then pretty soon my bookkeeper leaves and my sister-in-law comes in, and she's an amazing bookkeeper. And then she's like, starts taking care of our stuff. And all of a sudden it's like all 3 businesses are starting to click right at the same time. And it's like, and I start seeing actual growth and bills getting paid off with her managing our money, and just her coming was such a blessing. It was after I did that $250. So I'm like, okay, I'm doing $250 a week and through the business. And then pretty soon I start seeing that change. And I'm like, you know what? If I can do $250 a week, I can do $300 a week. And here we go. So I went to $300 a week, and I'm not joking. Within a probably 6 weeks after that or something, the wife's like, we were just at that point. The wife's like, hey, the girls are getting old enough. Let's go do a trip, just the 2 of us. Let's go down to Seattle for a weekend. Let's get away, you and me. And she's like, well, hey, this weekend, Georgie and Winnie Banoff is like Global Celebrations is going to be in Seattle. And she's like, these guys are really good. Let's go to the conference. And so we fly down to Seattle, just the 2 of us, to go to this conference. We don't know a single person at this conference. There's probably like 500 people there. And the very first night, I'm standing up there just worshiping. And they had a special prayer line for the first 100 people that subscribed or whatever. And I'm up there praying, and this couple comes up to me, and they said, hey, are you in line for prayer? I'm like, no, I'm just worshiping. They're like, hey, can we pray for you? I was like, yeah, absolutely. And so they started praying for me and had a couple of words for me. And it lit. I was like, hey, they hear from God. Amen. Yeah. Thank you, guys. And that was it. And that night, they present this trip that they're going to have going to Israel. And they're like, if you want to go to Israel, just stand up. And then Georgian's like, even if you don't have the finances to go to Israel, he's like, money just has a way of supernaturally coming in. Just stand up. And I mean, I've got faith. And I'm thinking, okay, let's see, who's going to plow my snow? Who's going to take care of the frozen pipes? Because it's in February, And I'm thinking about it. And I was like, I want to go to Israel. And my oldest daughter, had been talking about wanting to go to Israel. And my wife says, I think we should stand up, hon. And I'm like, you want to go to Israel? She said, no, I'm just believing for funds for missions. And she's like, why, you want to go to Israel? I'm like, yeah, I've wanted to for a while. I was like, okay. So we stand up. And it's like, I made that decision at that point. I'm going to Israel. And in me putting God in a box, I'm like, yeah, I can see getting a good sell, a good job. Maybe somebody blesses me with like, a couple, and they know I'm going on this trip and bless me at $3,000 to the church or something. And, and how this is going to go. But I made that decision. And 2 days later, the final day, we go to the fellowship luncheon there, and they do a fire tunnel. I go through there, and Georgian's there. I was like, hey, I'm going to Israel. I was like, I stood up. I'm going. He's like, do it. I was like, I'm believing for the funds. I'm going. Right after that, we go, the fellowshiped over. Everybody's leaving. And this couple that prayed for me the very first night, come in. And so, hey, how's it going? You guys go to the fellowship luncheon? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, and he's like, so what do you do for fun in Petersburg? And we started talking to them, and they have 3 girls just like us. They're self-employed just like us, and we just had so much in common. My wife came in, introduced them to my life, and they're like, hey, we'll be honest with you guys. We just feel like God's been targeting you this weekend. They're like, we saw you on night 1, and they're like, we've been praying for you guys all weekend. And they're like, we noticed you stood up, for the fellowship. I meant for the wanting to do the Israel trip. And the husband's like, I would love to go do the Israel trip, but I've got some work stuff going on during that time. And his wife's like, I would love to go, but I'm waiting to go to Mozambique and take care of the orphans, which is exactly what my wife would do. And they're like, but God just really put on our heart that we're to help sow toward your trip. And he pulls out a check that's folded in half, and he hands it to him. He's like, I don't know what it costs, but he's like, hopefully it'll cover expenses, babe. He's like, if there's anything left over, just be blessed and have a good trip. And I didn't think anything dollar-wise. I put a check in my pocket. And I'm like, thank you so much for being obedient. Oh, my gosh. And like, man, we'd love to bless you sometime. You ever want to come up to Alaska, go bump some icebergs? And I'm like, well, hey, no strings attached whatsoever. Our phone number's on the check, and we just chatted a little bit. And then they're like, well, hey, the music's starting. This is the last session. They're doing a little music and praise and worship, and then it's done. And so they take off. I was like, oh, I got to go to the bathroom, huh? And I was like, oh, wait a second. And I go and I pull this check out, and here's a blank check for $12,000.
Oh, come on.
There's like 400 or 500 people at the conference. I'm like, this is like winning the lottery for some people. Like for some people, $12,000, like my ship has come in, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like we know nobody here. And it's like, they just gave us $12,000. They didn't know my name. It wasn't on the check, but their information was on a check written out for $12,000. And I was like, thank you, Lord. I'm like, and that night I saw Jordan out on the line. I said, hey, I'm going to Israel. He's like, yeah, do it. I'm like, no. Somebody, I don't know, just gave me a check for $12,000. I am going. And he's like, amen, Wow. And when we met up with them in Israel, he's like, I remember you're the one that got gifted like $12,000. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, that was me. And so I just started sharing tithing with people. And I've got people that have been in the ministry that like, I've been struggling with that, or I've been wondering about that. But it doesn't just stop there. After that whole deal, sometime later, our pastors head out of town. They said, Charles, Tiffany, we'd like you guys to preach while we're gone. And our pastor didn't preach on tithing. He didn't want to be one of the pastors, hey, I'm just here to grow money, because he's a man of faith and he believes that God will provide. And so he never really preached on tithing. And we left and we preached on tithing. And afterwards, my sister-in-law, who does all my accounts payables, all my accounts receivables, in charge of paying that stuff, she came up to us after church and she's like, oh my gosh, I was hoping you guys would preach on tithing. And she's like, and then shares her testimony with us. She's like, we're not quite there yet, but we've been given this. And it's like, God did this and did this. And I'm like, Angie, I was like, that is awesome. I'm like, that is so cool. I was like, that makes me want to start giving $500 a week and see what happened. And she's like, oh no, please don't do that, Charles. Please don't do that. And because she's the one responsible for making sure my bills are good. 100%. And you know what? I told my wife after we left, I said, you know what? Even if it's nothing more, just to show her that God provides and will provide, I was like, I want to do it. And so that's what I do Sunday morning. I go in the office, I write a check, does the fellowship, $500, and I leave the carbon copy on there for her to balance the checkbook when she comes in. And I started doing it. I started doing $500 a week. And then before I know it, then I go do this crane truck job, and the maintenance guy's like, hey, Charles, the guy that owns this building is looking to sell this building. He's like, he wants over $1 million for it, but it brings in, the state pays him like almost $20,000, over $18,000 a month for the building. I was like, really? I'm like, I didn't know the state didn't own the building. He's like, yeah. I was like, okay. He's like, but if you buy it, you got to keep us on. Because him and his wife did the janitorial maintenance. And you know what? We were able to work it out. Like, it was a few months before he ever even got back to me and that guy, and it worked out. He sold me the building for less than he bought it for 18 years previous. And, he's like, I had the building sold 2 years ago for $1.5 million, and my wife wouldn't sign the paperwork. And he's like, we've had some medical issues, we've had some stuff going on. He's like, I'll sell you this building for $1.5 million. He said 1.15. He said, that's what I paid for this 18 years ago. And I said, okay, we'll do it. And we were able to take a business that a property that God blessed us with before, and that we had bought for like $350,000, almost had it paid off, got a commercial appraisal on it for $900,000, and then it was able to borrow the money to get into this state building. And he ended up, the bank loaned us 1.2. He took 1.1. Another 100,000 went into escrow to do dock work on the little dock there. And my company, Tonka Toy Rentals, came in and did the dock work and got the money. And then that upped our income by like $5,000 a month. We were thinking $3,000. And then when it was all said and done, it was like, there must be like $5,000 a month extra profit here. And for somebody like me, that was, it was like night and day. And so we went in and blessed our maintenance people with like a $300 a month raise. And they were just, floored. And I'm like, hey, just keep doing what you're doing. Just make my job as easy as possible. And we appreciate you guys. And so, and I've just got steps like that where we've just got blessed and we get more consistent about it and gets blessed. And then we get a boat and we start, my wife, the other day, we started talking about tithing. She's like, at first she's like, hey, hon, she's like, we used to have these kids with compassion. We support these. She's like, it's really been on my heart. That's where she's like, I started supporting like 3 kids. And I'm like, okay. She's like, I want 100 kids. I want to support 100 kids. And I'm like, honey, dial it back just a little bit. Don't get in a big rush. And she's like, no, I mean like the next 10 years. I'm like, oh, I thought we were talking like ASAP. Yeah. I'm like, 10 years? I'm like, yeah, it's not going to take you that long. Don't worry about it. And the other day we started talking about money and she's like, well, I hope you don't mind, but I started giving an extra $500 a month to these over here. I'm like, well, how much are we giving them now? And I'm like, okay, well, you're giving them, I was like, the number that you're paying them now is about $250 more. I was like, I thought we were giving them like $250 a month or $500. I said, I wanted to be giving them at least $1,000. That was on my heart. She's like, oh no, I just upped it. We're now doing like $1,250 a month for these guys. And I'm like, oh, amen. That's awesome. And she's like, I was like, yeah, you picking up more kids, and she's like, well, I got tired of balancing the checkbook, or balancing it or whatever, She's like, it was easier to just pay for the whole orphanage, like $350. I'm like, what? You get a deal on them? I'm giving her a hard time. I'm like, what is it, like buy 6 get 1 free or something? I'm like, it, made your book where to just sponsor the orphanage. And so she's like, well, I feel like if we're getting blessed more, we can bless more. And so I'm like, I love it. I'm all about it. I'm like, hey, you know what? You're handling our books. If we can afford it, you do what God puts on your heart, because I'm going to do what God puts on my heart. And that's one thing I have found, is that you can't outgive God. And numbers we're working with right now are probably chump change for a lot of people. But for where I came from, to have a goal of, I want to go 900 within a year's time, I was like, I want to be tithing at least 25,000 for the year, and to be able to hit that. And I don't even know what we're doing now. I don't think my wife even tells me what we're doing now, and we're just seeing it stack up. So I give God all the glory.
I've never heard anybody so excited about tithing, and I love the perspective on it. I can't wait. And the people who are listening, man, I hope they get encouraged. Like, don't see this as like your pie is going away. See this as look what God has done. Look at the testimony. So with that,
I can't afford not to tithe.
Yeah.
It opens doors. It opens doors spiritually. And that's one thing that my pastor has always said is like, a lot of times you'll see people, their heart is where their money is.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, your heart is where your money is. I'm like, oh, that sits deep with what's really important,
Yeah.
And,
Oh man. Okay, we gotta land the plane, but I want you to wrap it up with. This is a surprise question to you,
all right.
but if you would have had to summarize, like, here is my life kind of message so far. Like, here's an encouragement to somebody. This would be like my message for my life so far. What would you say?
I would say that I give God all the glory, and so it's so hard to do it on your own. That only under have that relationship with God, and it's all about personal relationship. Having a personal relationship with God, not and knowing who you are in Him, and knowing that He wants the best for you. First of all, you got to be healthy in order to be able to sit in a healthy relationship. Don't settle for somebody. Find the woman that God wants for you, because sometimes there's been times my wife thought us being together was a cruel joke because we're complete opposites at stuff. But my strong suits cover her, and her strong suits cover my weaknesses. And so it's important to be equally yoked, and it's really just, the glory of God. As far as business goes, you can't give God, I've said that over and over, but and just make God and family number one, and everything else will be added unto you. If you've got happiness, I mean, that's all that matters, that you got that happy life, because it's God, it's family, it's friends. That's what it's really all about. Those are the important things in life, and if you're a good steward, you're going to be blessed.
Oh man, thanks for that, man. So for those people, check out AlaskanYacht.com. Get a trip up, start communication, open the door to talk to Charles and crew about that. And man, thank you for coming 3,500 miles down to Central Texas. I can't wait. We're ready round two in the wheelhouse of the legend.
It's going to happen. I'm looking forward to it. And thank you for having me. When I flew in here the other day, I had no idea that we are going to be doing this.
Yeah.
And it was just a nice little gift from Pastor Ed.
Yeah.
And it's been just an honor and a pleasure meeting you and your crew here. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
Look forward to continuing our relationship.
Yeah.
And I will say thank you to Jared Brown and Bite of Brownie Productions. Check him out for all kinds of video, social media and marketing needs. Jared, thanks for setting all this up and doing this. We appreciate you.
Thank you for joining us on this latest edition to the StoryField podcast. We hope that you have been challenged, inspired, and ready to take that next step, whatever that is. If you know someone with an amazing story that needs to be heard, send us an email at info@thestoryfield.com. Have a fantastic day, and we can't wait for you to join us on the next episode of The StoryField.